Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this MBA analytical session. With me, I have Ritika. Ritika is a former e-GMATer, and she's a current student at Columbia Business School. Welcome, Ritika.
Thanks, Rajat. Very pleased to be here and speaking to you today.
All right. We have a fairly exciting session today where we're going to talk about Ritika's journey to Colombia. She's a very unique background. I was actually writing this down. So she was a lawyer in the UK. Then she went and ran her family business in Singapore. She's also a current entrepreneur. Ritika, is it fair to say you're also that business that you have is still it's still running? And as well as an MBA student, and then she wants to pursue a variety of careers. So you're someone who's had a decade of experience, and then you decided you wanted to, and a lot of business experience, and then you decided that she wanted to do an MBA. So for me, this is exciting because someone with as rich an experience as Ritika has, how do you position your candidacy? What do you position? What do you leave out? I think those are things that are very interesting. How do you get a letter of recommendations considering you've been an entrepreneur or have been working in the family business? I think those are very interesting things for me. But before that, Ritika, why don't you tell in detail your what we call as your profile with regards to your professional background, your professional career, just about 2 to 3 minutes, and then Karthik, if we have the profile PDF, we can share that as well.
Sure, Rajat. Like you already said, I started my career as a lawyer. I went to National University of Juridical Sciences, which is one of the top law schools in India. And at the end of my 5-year program there, I got an offer from a firm in London, which is called Linklaters. It's a magic circle firm in London, and was very fortunate to get that offer. So decided to go pursue that. I stayed in London for a couple of years while I was working here, and during my stint as a lawyer, I focused on the energy and infrastructure sector. So I did that for a few years, and then decided to move to Singapore, where my family is based. And because I was making that transition, in geographies from the UK to Singapore, I also then, had to answer the question to myself: do I want to continue in the law? I could potentially go back to the same firm or try something different. And I was curious to understand the non-legal side of the deals I was working on. So went to Singapore, joined my family business, in the renewable energy division, and worked on the commercial side of energy and infrastructure deals.
And on the commercial side, you executed renewable energy projects, as we were talking about.
Absolutely.
And then the third thing is you also started this business, which is called the Art of Health, which leverages Ayurveda, and you're very, very passionate about that business as well.
Yes, absolutely. So, I over the last year and a half before I came to Colombia, I started a company in Singapore called, like you said, the Art of Health, and the idea was to bring personalized healthcare to individuals using the principles of Ayurveda. I personally benefited a lot from the use of Ayurveda, but my most important takeaway from that was, the whole mantra that one size does not fit all. You can't give the same pill to every person and hope that, they get better. And Ayurveda has a beautiful science of, how to execute this. And my idea was, how do I take that ancient knowledge and bring it on a more kind of modern digital platform and make it available to people around the world?
Okay, so you are a business person who arguably is also spiritual in some ways.
You could say that.
I could say that. Okay, all right. So let's start with you've done so much. So why MBA now? So I mean you've done all of this now. What made you go for an MBA at this stage of your career? Arguably, you have about what 10, 12 years of professional background right now.
I had, so, the law degree is slightly longer than some of the other degrees. I did a 5-year law degree. So I have 8 years, about 8+ years of work ex when I kind of
Okay.
came to the MBA. Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, a question I asked myself several times when I was studying for the GMAT, and more often on days when I was very disheartened. Why the MBA now? But I think for me, it was a few factors, Rajat. First was that, having studied the law and then transitioned into business, I always felt that, I wanted to equip myself with skills that I just did not have any formal training in. So that was particularly, in the field of finance, because, as lawyers, you really don't see that. So I thought, this was a skills gap that I could, meet if I came into the MBA. Outside of that, I also, I'm somebody who's always very open and keen to learn new things. And I had already worked in Europe, in the UK, and then in Asia, in India and in Singapore. And the idea of coming to a new geography and exploring that as a market was very exciting. And I mean, the US is known for building some of the world's biggest and most impactful businesses, right? So I wanted to come and give myself the opportunity of learning from people here.
Okay, that's a fair response, and I absolutely agree. I think in this we live only once, and I am a firm believer in that. And you've experienced these geographies, and then why not come and experience a country and get the skills at the same time? The country that's built the biggest enterprises in the world. I'd say probably the only $1 trillion enterprises, I would say, if you take Saudi Aramco out or so. So then you're among the top when it comes to the GMAT. You're among the top 3% of students worldwide. So how did you get there? What are some of the challenges you faced, and how did you overcome those challenges?
I think first I should really take this opportunity to thank you and e-GMAT for the absolutely incredible support that I received through my GMAT preparation journey. I kind of once I decided I want to pursue the MBA, I started looking at what GMAT resources were there and looked at various online resources, kind of bought your official guides, and started solving lots of questions. But after a while, I realized that I wasn't really getting anywhere. Like, it was you were making a little progress, but not really enough for you to crack the GMAT. That's when I realized I need a really structured approach. I needed some analytical information to understand where were the areas that I needed to work on. Like I said, because I had been a lawyer, I had been out of touch with the quant side of things for a while. I was reasonably good student at math when it came to when I was in school, but as a lawyer, you don't kind of go into it, and I had not looked at questions like that for many years now. So I basically signed up for e-GMAT, and then I think the first thing that I was asked to do was to write an exam, and then
the Sigma X mock, that was
the mock test, right? And then it was a free mock test, and then they said, okay, we're going to give you this whole analytics information, right, telling how much time you took for each section, where were what were the areas where you performed well or you didn't. And that was very helpful, because then I worked with one of the mentors at e-GMAT, Karan, who helped me then chart out a strategy of how to kind of focus on the areas where I need to develop, my skills. So I think I was also on my side, I think, religious in trying to follow through the plan that they gave me, and I saw the results as I kind of went on.
So what were your quant and verbal scores in that mock, and then eventual? I don't know if you remember the initial mock, but eventual.
I don't remember, but to be honest, I don't remember now. It's been a while, but I do know, of course, like my I think my verbal scores were above average, and my quant scores were below average. And I think that was I guess different from a lot of Indian students that you see at the MBA, right? Because most people come from an engineering background. So that's what I had to work towards. And I think at the end of it, actually, when I gave the actual GMAT, I scored more on quant than I did on verbal.
Do you remember the final split of that 740? Was it like a 50 40 Q50 V40? Or
I'm going to have to dig up my GMAT score.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the first time, actually, for folks who are with us. This is the first time Ritika and I are talking. So it's usually if I do a GMAT journey, I remember that piece of information. Okay. But yeah, that's good to know. 740, I'll take 740 any day. So without worrying about the split. So first of all, with that score, let's kind of talk about which all schools did you apply to, and then specifically why INSEAD and CBS, Columbia.
Yeah. So I think, Rajat, I think one of the things that you said when you started introducing me was to say that I have had a lot of experience over the last couple of years,
Yes.
and probably definitely more than a typical MBA candidate. So
Hmm.
for me, when I was looking at schools, time was an important factor because it has an opportunity cost,
Hmm.
and I didn't want to spend 2 years in an MBA program. I was looking for shorter programs, and INSEAD, of course, offers the 1 year program, which I thought was a great way for me to do the MBA and spend just what I thought would be the right amount of time. So I actually started only kind of looking at INSEAD very single-mindedly, and then initially I made my application only to INSEAD, and then I got the offer from INSEAD after a pretty long, rigorous process. And once I got the offer, I started speaking to a few friends and consultants, and when people asked me why I only applied to INSEAD, I kind of said to them that I was looking at a shorter program. At which point, people informed me about Columbia's 18-month program, which is a slightly accelerated program. It's absolutely identical to the regular 2 year program, with the only difference being that instead of getting the summer off, you take classes in the summer. So you complete the MBA in a span of
So it's the
18.
same number of credits, essentially, is what you're saying.
Absolutely same number of credits. You have access to the same professors, same resources, same networks, same campus. Everything is same. The only difference is that you basically, spend the summer taking classes.
Okay, and just for my information, how big is the Jan intake or the accelerated program in terms of the class size?
I think there are about 70 to 80 students per class, and we
Mm.
have three sections which, have,
About 210 to 240 or so.
yeah, 240 to
Okay.
50, I'd say that's
Okay,
the.
so it's a smaller program compared to the regular 2 year MBA,
So
relatively.
you end up graduating at the same time.
Hmm.
You graduate at the same time as the fall intake. The only
Got
difference,
it.
like I said, is that people who join in the fall take the summer off, and then
No,
people.
I mean the class size is smaller. The fall intake is a much bigger class
No,
size,
no,
right?
the class size is the same in the sense that every class still has about 70 to 80 students. In the
Oh, the
fall, there are like more number of sections.
more number of
Correct.
sections, right? Yeah, yeah, the batch.
Yeah.
So then, when you're taking classes, do you also take classes with those guys? I mean, are you guys completely integrated in other than the internship?
Absolutely. So what happens is Columbia has this program when you initially join the MBA, for the first couple of months, you do something called the core. So these are some foundational courses which Columbia believes as an MBA everyone should do, right? Things like
Mm.
statistics, economics. Um,
Okay.
this you take with your class, which tends to initially be people from your intake, right? But
Mm.
once you complete this over the first couple of months, you start doing primarily electives. This is whatever you want to do, and then you are integrated with absolutely everybody else,
Oh, yeah.
depending on what their choice is. So yeah.
So you only have that 2 month foundation, and that's really exciting. I mean, if you have electives for the remainder of the term, that's fantastic. Like
Right.
then you choose how you want to navigate through that journey.
Yeah, so I think out of the 18 months program, I would say like about the first 4 months is primarily when you're focused on the core. And the rest of the time, like I said, which is great, right? Because you build the basics,
Yes.
your understanding of, some basic concepts. And then you can really go and either choose things where you are already comfortable, or choose something completely different, right? Like I have friends who, for example, went to, investment banks and now are like exploring subjects like virtual reality and artificial intelligence. So it gives you, a great opportunity to really, try your hand at something very new and innovative.
Perfect. That's wonderful. So, folks, I see a bunch of questions in the right hand pane. Please keep on sending your intelligent questions. We still have we're at 7:44 a.m. my time in Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to go on till about 8:15, and then we're going to take on the Q&A. So, but if you have questions based on Ritika's responses, please keep on posting those questions. So we talked about INSEAD versus Columbia and how did you do that. Let's talk about the application process. And INSEAD has a super rigorous application process. I think probably the longest one that can recall. So how did you tackle it? How did you approach it? And and then the other piece is the international experience. How do you leverage that one? Because INSEAD does value a lot of international experience. So yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Rajat, when I completed my law degree and I decided to pursue law as a career in London, I also went through a very rigorous application process. Probably more rigorous than that of INSEAD. So
Oh.
thankfully for me, I had some training in how to kind of work on that. Also, having been a lawyer, and I used to be one of the editors of my journal in law school. I had a fair bit of experience in writing and editing documents. So I think all of that, of course, helped me. In my application process for B School and INSEAD specifically, INSEAD asks you all kinds of questions, about, your extracurricular interests, your journey so far, why INSEAD, I think your strengths and weaknesses, your long term and short term goals, like all of that, right? So I guess it's just really taking, like, you really need to develop this whole story around where you came from, where you're planning to go, and where does INSEAD really fit into that picture. And I think the way to approach it for me was at least taking a step back and understanding that story, because like you said, I've had a very unique journey. So to be able to convince them that why do I need to do an MBA now, how would it really add value, that was very important. So I spent some time kind of trying to tie all those pieces together, and then putting my application together, and then of course getting feedback from various people in terms of just whether the story is consistent. I think one of the things that I was told, which I thought was very helpful, and this is a question a lot of people have asked me when you look at the applications, is I think admissions teams at business schools, I think at some level like a consistent story. If you've been somebody, I don't know, who's done iBanking, or like and suddenly you go like, I want to be an entrepreneur. Sure, you can say that, but like, I think you really need to tie it in. You can't like be saying something which is completely like out of the ordinary. You can go into B School and then do things completely out of the ordinary. That's fine. But I think when you're writing that application, they just need to see consistency and commitment, right? Because for B schools, you are an investment, right? They hope that you would go to B School, do well, and over the years, be a successful person who brings good name to the school.
I think you kind of nailed it when you said consistency and commitment. Those, one is kind of in some ways, when you talk about a B school, incomplete without the other. And you took the example of, if you really say come from XYZ background and suddenly want to go to investment banking, that'd be very awkward. Yes, because B schools want to make sure that they take in candidates who have realistic post MBA goals, and that's where, and they want to take people who've performed consistency. That's where the consistency piece is, and the commitment to that post MBA goal, which means there should be some indication of something that you've done towards that. I think you spoke with Sharang when you made the decision between CBS and INSEAD, and Sharang's a classic example of in his first, he applied for his MBA twice. In his first application, his YMBA was absolutely off. He still had the 740, but his YMBA was absolutely off. He's someone who's an entrepreneur. He was actually then, post that, he had joined e-GMAT, and but then he says, I want to go into investment banking. Like, how, and that was the feedback that he got. It's like, how the hell is that going to happen? I mean, if there's no connection in what you're doing. And then he changed his YMBA to becoming a product manager at a tech company. And at e-GMAT, he had done product management and he had worked on improving processes. And there was a lot of history over there. And the same GMAT score, just a bit more addition in the profile, led to about $250,000 in scholarship. So that's I mean, and about, I think, 5 admits or so.
Yeah, that's a great example, I think, to just also just kind of reinforce what I was trying to say. Basically,
Mm.
B schools want to take a calculated risk, right? If you say something completely out of whack, then they're not sure, and it's better if you give them a story that they can buy.
And you have to buy into that story as well. I mean, you just can't assume you can go into investment banking
Absolutely.
and that's going to work. Um, okay, short-term and long-term goals at Columbia. Um, how did you tackle that question? And yeah.
So I think for me, Rajat, I kind of have had a few years of experience in the energy and infrastructure sector, and over the course of my time working in that sector, I became more and more focused on sustainable initiatives. So one of the last things I was doing at the company where I was working with was understanding, the whole problem of PV, which is photovoltaic waste management, right?
Mhm.
So, a problem that I thought was very interesting was, everybody talks about the solar industry as, this, green industry, which is going to, change the way we live our lives, and, be really great for the environment. But what a lot of people don't understand is that all these solar farms that you're setting up all over the world are going to generate tons and tons of waste because nobody knows what to do with these panels. Where are they going to go? How are they going to get recycled? And this was one of the projects that I was working on in my company to try and bring this kind of a technology to Asia for recycling and end of waste management for photovoltaics. And so I think, for my long and short term goals, of course, I said to Columbia that, in my short term, I wanted to come back and take a more leadership position in the company I was already working in to kind of drive further the work I had done over the last couple of years. And in the longer term, I've kind of showed to them that I want to be an entrepreneur and really set up a very purpose driven business, which is kind of trying to achieve sustainability through energy and healthcare, which is, my other
The
area of
art of health. Yes. So essentially, you tied your short and long term goals to stuff that was doing. It was very, very logical in that sense. The transition seemed, and then Colombia was the missing piece where they provided the skills that you needed to take
absolutely.
both those initiatives to their eventual outcomes.
Absolutely.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I want to just ask this other question, which is, you know, yours is a classical case where for the last, I think, what, 5 years, you've practically worked in a family business, right? And you've run your own business, which is the art of health. So, letter of recommendations. How did you manage those?
Yeah, I think it was definitely one of those things I was very concerned about, right? Because when you're not in, this big organization, who do you approach? So what I initially thought, Rajat, was I first thought, okay, I worked at this really big law firm, which was my previous job. Should I go and, ask
Well,
somebody?
and that was pre 2015, by the way, right?
Absolutely. And that's what I thought initially. But then, as I spoke to people, I realized that B schools would prefer you to get a recommendation from somebody you've worked more recently with and not
Hmm.
somebody you worked with like, 4, 5, 6 years back. So then I started looking at, people that I'd worked more recently with. It was very clear that I could not take a recommendation from somebody who was related to me because clearly there would be an assumption of bias. So I then
Not just an assumption, there is bias. I think let's call it that way. Let's.
I, I have a difference in opinion, but of course, I think it's not a great strategy one way or the other, right? Because you never know, right? So I think a good way to approach it, and that's exactly what I did, was to either approach somebody in the management of your company who's not related to you, right? Who you can
Mhm.
show. So, for example, somebody in the management of the company where I worked was, a very senior partner who was ex management of Siemens, for example. So he
Got it.
came from the industry, somebody very credible. So that was helpful. Alternatively, you could approach somebody who's been a customer or a supplier. Again, somebody working in the business who's, had some kind of, dealings with
Large enough contract, long enough exposure.
absolutely, where you've negotiated with them and, either executed a project with them or, like something, right? And that's what I did then. I kind of went to, one of the partner companies that we worked with, and requested somebody that I had done a fair amount of work with, if they would be willing to write my uh, recommendation.
They didn't extract another ounce of discount from you in lieu of writing that recommendation.
Thankfully, I negotiated my last deal before I asked for that recommendation.
Okay.
So I saved my company some money.
Okay. Okay. That's good. I think that's the strategy. That's what you first negotiate the deal, get the numbers in place, and say, can you please also write a letter of recommendation? Okay. So that was one. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong. Do you need two, right? Or which was how did you get the second one, or were they both?
The recommendation.
Yes.
So the first recommendation was from somebody in the
Oh,
management of my
the
company.
Siemens person.
Yes, and the second recommendation was from a company in the US that I worked with, and it was somebody very senior in the company who agreed to provide me. So this was like a partner organization that we
Partner.
did business
Okay,
with. Yeah,
got it. Let's talk about interviews.
yeah.
Um, and so and again, forgive me for the ignorance in my question. So, um, and so first of all, the question is: A, how was the interview process at both CBS and INSEAD? And then, since you talked about the application process at your law school, how was it compared? If there were an interview at that time, how did this interview process compare to if there were an interview a decade back? If you
Oh,
could do a comparison. I know that one's not there in the list of questions we sent you, but since you talked about it, it just. But
no,
let's talk about how was the interview process. How are they similar at INSEAD and CBS first? I think let's first talk about that.
yeah.
And how are they different?
So, the interview, like I said, I got my INSEAD admit before I even applied to CBS. So my INSEAD, does it's a typical process. Once you get called for interview, INSEAD will do 2 rounds of interviews. Both these interviews are with alumni. They usually choose two kinds of persons. So one would be somebody who's a very recent alumni, and then somebody who's more senior. So they take these two different persons, and they generally try and do one of those interviews with somebody who's from a similar industry to yours. So I did it with somebody who had worked in the energy sector, and then another
Okay.
interview with somebody who has worked in a completely different industry, right? So the other person I worked with was in more
Interesting.
the digital kind of uh, I think e-commerce space, something like that. So they have like these two different profiles of people who would interview you. In terms of what happens during the interview, I mean, and I think this is generally true for most interviews. I think there's one leg of the interview which usually starts on a very typical note, right? Like they want to go over your CV, talk about your profile, your journey, why MBA, why INSEAD, all of that. And then, of course, at some point, depending on who the interviewer is and how your conversation is going, it could go into something which is, a little more personal, right? Like for me, one of my interviews, for example, we started talking about the startup because the interviewer herself had just, she was in that process of deciding whether she wants to quit her job and start a new company, and she was actually
Let's not name the interviewer then.
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
But she was interested in kind of understanding my own journey with setting up my startup in Singapore. So that just it became more of like this personal conversation, and it flowed very seamlessly and naturally, right? So it was like a conversation I'd have just with absolutely anybody, and I was very passionate about what I was doing, and I guess that hopefully was able to shine through. So that was my process with INSEAD. And then the process with Columbia for me. I was a pretty late applicant at Columbia. I think I applied to Columbia on absolutely the last day of the deadline. And so I know that some of my friends interviewed with the admissions team at Columbia. I was asked to interview with an alumni. He was, a very, again, senior person. Who was in the I think management of AXA Insurance, and he interviewed me. It was a similar structure in the sense that some very typical questions, why MBA, why Columbia, why now, and then we got talking about my startup and my interests outside of like work. So I was telling him about a podcast that I launched last year on Ayurveda, and he was really kind of intrigued about that. And then I told him that I really enjoy road trips, so we were talking about like my travels around the world. And so I think what I understood, and what I think is really useful for a lot of MBA aspirants to know, is that of course you can go preparing for the typical part of an interview, which is kind of going to be similar to whichever B school you try and get into. But I think what is really useful is if you can find some part in that interview where you can really allow your personality to shine through, right? Like something that makes you come alive, which gives you a little more character than just being somebody who's worked in XYZ places and now wants to do an MBA to go to the next step in their career, right? If you can find that connect, or you can just find an opportunity for that aspect of your personality to get reflected in your conversation, I think that can be very powerful. Because what we do need to understand at the end of the day is we're all humans, and even the interviewers, right? Everyone likes an interesting story, that something that that would help them remember you over, say, the 10 other candidates they were interviewing, right? Everyone kind of has a career path and then
Mhm.
goes after MBA. But what really sets you apart, like what makes them remember you?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think so. That's very well said, and I think there's another aspect to it also that when I was listening to both these interviews, that came out as and again, I don't exactly know, and I have them in my notes. But do these interviews get to see your essays or get to see your resume? I mean, do they know their post MBA goals? But if I were an interviewer and I looked at this and I said, "Hey, you've a startup in the art of health. Your long term goal is the art of health. The stuff that you've done around that." Which means that makes your post MBA goal more believable, and it allows me to then further go into that personality aspect of yours to say how likely are you to pursue that, how likely are you to succeed in that. And I think for me that's a lot of information that otherwise if we had a more Q&A kind of interview, that would not, it's very difficult to extract that information. So I think that way, I think an interview is also, I mean, in my opinion, um, a means to extract the truth as to what you've written over there and add more color to it.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. I'm not sure if all the interviews have access to your entire application. They definitely have access to your resume, right? So that,
Yes.
of course, you get an opportunity to say a variety of things there, including like what your interests are outside of work. Um, I think the other thing which I thought was very interesting, and particularly for me was very good about my interview for CBS, was the person I was interviewing with was also very candid. He had been a consultant before, and then he tried to do a startup, and then he was now the CFO of this really big company. So he had an appreciation for somebody who has different aspirations, and was came from, I thought he wasn't like judging you and hoping that you had a very kind of cookie cutter approach to life. And I think most of the B schools have really smart people who go very far in life, and I think they do have an appreciation for something like this. So depending on how you're getting along with the interview, I think you can take that opportunity to
Yes.
share aspirations, and your journey very candidly.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And, okay, we talked about CBS over INSEAD. I, I think I want to really just talk about this other question that we were talking about. So you've worked in the UK. You've um, presumably you've work experience in the US as well, um, and so in Singapore, and now you've been here for 6 months. So what's the difference between these places? In your opinion, how are people different? How is life different in many ways?
Um, so of course, I was born and initially
You were
raised.
born in India.
Yeah, born initially raised in India. Absolutely love India. I think we have the most interesting country with very eclectic people. But I started my career in London. I think I absolutely love London. Think it's one of the greatest cities in the world to live with.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, in terms of I guess in terms of people, I just feel like the difference between London and New York, what I've seen so far, is I think here you just see that people are probably slightly warmer, more approachable. I think the American culture in general is very warm and embracing, particularly towards people who come from the outside. London is also to an extent, but I just feel that New York and US
How
is.
much of a foreigner do you feel in New York? Let me just ask this question.
Sorry, was that Rajat?
How much do you feel as if you are a foreigner, that you don't belong to this place?
You don't feel that. To be honest, I don't think I've like felt that at all. I think it's a very kind of
Mm,
embracing culture, and you literally see people from
mm,
every part of the world, right? Like
mm,
from Europe, from Asia, from South America, from Australia.
mm,
I've not felt that. I think it's pretty easy to like get
mm,
integrated,
mm,
and that I think is a very big thing, right? Particularly
mm,
when you're moving geographies. I think that for me really stands out about the US.
yes. I absolutely agree with that. I think the part that I felt the strongest, because I lived in Europe for about 5 years, and again, it's not we're not I'm not trying to say it's a fault of people or something. I think it's just how the culture of the country is, where um, uh, the first 5 months when in Europe, the fact that I lived in Germany, there's a word called Auslander.
Mhm.
Lander is land and aus is out. So that's a word that it's not in a derogatory term, but it's just something that was told that that's the word over there. In this country, I've never felt that, and that's something which I think it's something incredible about this country. The very fact that little things such as, hey, you're not supposed to speak in your native language when you are in a group. You're supposed to speak in English. It's frowned upon if if Mexican people speak in Spanish, or vice versa. If we speak in Hindi, that's something that's looked down upon. I think those are little things uh, uh, that make a difference they're way more welcoming for you as an individual. I think that's a big piece from why I chose to stay here versus staying in Europe. And very well put.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think just to add to that, I feel that US also does invoke this sense of hope and optimism, like a sense of opportunity, right? I
Yes.
think everybody who comes here looks at this as a place where, whatever it is, you want to build a career, start a company. I think people, and you have so many examples to see that, all of that is possible. Relative to so many other parts of the world. So I think that is also what really makes this.
Yeah. So in addition to examples, I think we don't look down upon failure. That's a very big thing here. Failure is absolutely okay. You started a company, it didn't work out, so what? Start another one. So which I think is, I think India, the culture has changed a lot. It wasn't before. Failure was considered bad. Europe, I think, just it's still not the same place as it's in the US. Especially, in certain cities in Europe, I'm sure in Berlin, for example, it's there, and in London, I'm sure it's there to a certain degree. But quite a few places in Europe, that piece isn't there. So I think, yeah, that belief in you can do anything, and then it doesn't matter if you fail. But by the way, there's no one to protect you if you fail either over here. You're all on your own. You can't go back to the state. uh,
Absolutely.
so you didn't do any internship, right? But you're looking to sit into recruitment. So what kind did you do an internship during
So I actually just completed my summer term last Friday, which was last week, and I'm actually I have an offer for a venture capital internship currently, which
Hmm.
I'm hoping to do for the rest of the summer and continue it in semester. So you
Okay.
also have that opportunity at Columbia to choose your credits and organize your classes in such a way that you can do some part-time work, which a lot of people tend to do. So that's, yeah. I'm just trying to
That's
give.
something that I will recommend everyone to do. It's not just at Columbia. Most other business schools offer during the second year. In lieu of credit, you can work as long as you've studied for six. You've been in the country for 6 whole months or so. So you can do that, and that's an incredible thing. I had 4 internships during my second year. That well, it's important, right? For me, I was a researcher and I wanted to go into marketing. Like, how do you
How do
hire
you?
a researcher, hardcore researcher into marketing? And that's the way you do those internships.
Very cool.
So yeah. Now, post MBA opportunities. What kind of post MBA opportunities does Columbia offer? What are you looking forward to? What have your seniors told you?
Yeah, so I think what I've seen here, Rajat, is that there's a whole gamut of opportunities that people can take, and like you very rightly said, you of course need to make a case for why you want to get into that industry, but there is a good uh, there's a really good scope to pivot into different industries, right? So I've seen people who've gotten into venture capital or into the private equity industry, joined startups or pursued entrepreneurship and started their own companies. So this is more on the entrepreneurship VC side of things. Then of course you have Columbia's known to be a very good finance school, so you see a lot of people, like I said, going to private equity or investment banking or investment management, through hedge funds, for example. And then, of course, there is consulting. And I know, I think one of the questions that was sent to me was, well, INSEAD is considered like the consulting school, but I have to say that I've seen some incredible consultants from, all the top, firms around the world in the program, and then also seen people, at the end of the program go and recruit at these places. So, lots of consultants. And then you have the big corporates, right? The Fortune 500 companies looking for people for, leadership positions and like, strategy roles, operations roles, marketing roles, etc. So, yeah, it opens up like this whole, consulting, banking, tech,
So would
entrepreneurship.
it be fair to say, I mean, post MBA opportunities are not getting a job is not a concern? Is that a fair
You would
statement?
you would have to.
Post Columbia, getting a job is
Yeah.
not a concern. Would that be fair
Uh,
to say? Based on what you've seen with your seniors or people.
I mean, what I would say is that, Columbia does try and equip you with the best resources possible, through the career center, through like, opportunity for, interview process and, helping with applications, etc., to really put you in a really good position. The school also, of course, commands a certain reputation and brand name, which really helps you. And then after that, I think a little bit of it is your personal, efforts to try and pursue things. But I think, if the whole mix together, if you put in the effort, absolutely, I think you have, some amazing opportunities to get offers from these different industries, if you can make the case. So.
Okay. All right. I think we are around that 40-minute mark. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining. We'll be taking questions next. But next week, we have a session with Rohan, who's going to talk about very similar experience from Fuqua. So please register for that. And again, these are very unique backgrounds, so we're going to talk about that as well. Um, so let's kind of go from the very beginning, and I think I'm going to take Mukund's question here. That is, how do you push yourself during the GMAT preparation? I mean, you felt this, so what did you do?
Um, I think couple of things, right? I feel like you should first realize that this is very common and happens to everybody, and despite that, a lot of people, cross that little bump on the road and get to the other side successfully. So there's always hope. I think it's important to set some milestones. Because that helps you know whether you're on the right track, and if you're not on the right track, how do you change strategies, right? So you decide that by X date, this is what you need to complete, this is what you want to score on your mock tests. And third, I really think it helps to have some level of accountability to somebody, and you can choose who that person is, whether it's a parent, a friend, or somebody, a mentor. For me, I worked with a mentor at e-GMAT, and that was very helpful. Like, I do remember, I remember writing one mock test where I didn't think like I scored what I should have, but we worked on corrective strategies, and then I took another exam a few days later, and I performed well. So it's important to have somebody that you can rely on, who you can be accountable to, who can push you when you're really feeling, like you said, demotivated. I think some of these strategies can be very
I
useful.
think all three of them are really good. I want to just emphasize on a couple of them. First of all, I really like the first thing you said. If you're not feeling stressed, then there's one or two things. One is you're not pushing yourself enough, which is bad, or B, you're so smart that you should be getting a 780, 790 right away without, which I think very few people in that category. But if you're not feeling stressed, then you should push yourself harder. Maybe and I think that's something which is there. So everyone will feel stressed during the preparation. It's difficult. I mean, you weren't spending this time preparing, you weren't learning, and now suddenly, in addition to doing that full-time job, or more than a full-time job, because you have to worry about the letter of recommendation as well, you are now spending this time. So that stress, whether it's because of preparation, whether it's because of personal reasons, is going to be there, and that's something which you have to take it as given. And there's a reason why B schools value this score, because you've been able to overcome that stress and achieve something. Okay.
Absolutely.
The second thing is write to us. We know this, and we can help you plan it out, and we can't study for you, but we can definitely tell you strategies around it. The third thing that I would really recommend is register so subscribe to the YouTube channel. Our goal is to publish 2 success stories a week, and you see people who are been in your shoes and you've overcome that. And these are people, I mean, just I think yesterday we published a success story of someone who was able to score 780. The prior week, a guy who actually pushed himself from a 710 to a 750 in about 10 days. That's, I mean, imagine that stress around those 10 days. Yes, he had that 710, but pushing yourself to a 750, motivating yourself, telling folks around you, I'm gonna study. That's very, I mean, yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
so do that.
yeah, just because I remember you asked this question, Rajat. I think my first score was definitely like in 600 something, and
Mm.
so just to say that there is that you have, you can, if you keep working towards it, you will cross the bridge eventually.
Yes. Yeah, it's very trackable. I mean, especially at e-GMAT, we track all your metrics, and so if you're not getting there, you will see the metrics. Not you see yourself not achieving those metrics, and it's not just a single metric. It's that score of 740, 750, 720 is broken on but 8 to 10 different metrics, and each week at least one, if not two, metrics should improve. So yeah. I have a another very interesting question, which was. GPA, I think. Yes, this is a question. He says, I was the best student in my batch, but my GPA was very low for US. If you were the best student in your batch, it shouldn't be very low for US to begin with. Remember, GPA is not percentage, and in many ways, it's percentile. So, how did you struggle with this?
I didn't personally struggle with this, Rajat, but what I
Mm,
would say my understanding of B school admissions process is that, of course, you put whatever your GPA is on your resume, but there's most schools have this opportunity of, an additional question where you want to, they say, is there
mm,
anything else that you would like us to know, for example? And if you think that this is an area of concern where your GPA looks like it's,
mm,
not good enough, then I would use that section to probably explain to them that, whatever
mm,
reason, this is how your university functions, and actually you
mm.
were the best student in your class, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was supposedly the branch topper, and it shouldn't be 1 out of 4. Then in that case, that the whole GPA system, then he has to really look at how the conversion is done properly. I would say so. Yeah. So yeah. So there's a interview question. It's like during the interviews, and was the panel focused more on your technical knowledge or your behavioral? So uh, yeah,
Yeah.
this is Ritika for you.
I never faced any technical question, to be honest.
Mm,
It was there were behavioral questions. There were questions about your career. There were
mm,
questions about learnings from your career, your motivation for doing the MBA, why
mm,
now, why CBS, why INSEAD, whatever it is.
mm,
And then like I said, eventually it can branch into talking about things that you connect with
mm,
to your interviewer.
mm,
But I personally didn't. But having said that, I would not think that this is not possible.
mm,
Every interviewer is unique in how they want to interview you. And like I said, INSEAD particularly sends one interviewer
mm,
who is from your industry.
mm,
So there's always that scope that you will be asked something a little bit more technical. I don't think though B schools go very hardcore technical, because that's not the idea of business school.
mm,
But of course they want to know that you know what you've been doing, right? Like if you've been working in an industry for X number of years, of course you should be able to talk about it, right? But they're not going to question you and want you to like solve a problem, or like,
yeah.
yeah, no, that's not the
So
intention.
for me, I would say it's actually the opposite in terms of it's not anti-technical, but when I interview people for hiring at e-GMAT, they should be able to kind of walk me through their journey as someone who doesn't know what their industry is. If you can present that in a logical sense to me as someone who in general understands business, but is maybe doesn't know the nitty-gritties of the industry. The way you talked about, you said, hey, there's a when it comes to photovoltaic cells, there's a huge problem, right? It's you've got to dispose them off, and if you were to really add numbers to it, really say every year we're installing these many panels that leads to this much amount of waste, and we don't. That's kind of not talking about why is there a problem, why does it not degrade over so much time, but really say this is a problem and you're working towards a solution, and there are three possible options, and this is one of them that you worked on. That's a logical way of looking at it. It's not technical, I would say. So yes, and so I'd say if you get technical, then you're making a super technical, then you're probably making a mistake, unless and until the question by itself says, "Give me technical details of it." So so focus more on stories and just the logical journeys and decision makings over there. Okay, Ritika. So, Drishti's question: does CBS prefer candidates coming from a well-known or a brand name company? I mean, what based on the students that you've interacted with, what do you think? I mean, are there students from smaller companies? Are they primarily students from bigger companies? Is there a good mix at Columbia?
I would say there's a good mix, right? Like, say, for example, initial part of my career, I worked with a very well-known big company in the UK, like a big law firm. And then, of course, over the last couple of years, I was working, not with like a big company, but a smaller company. So you do see people coming from different backgrounds. I think there are two things, right? One is that Columbia just wants to see that you've been this motivated individual who's done well over the years wherever they've done. You could now whether you reflect that by showing that you went to a top company, which in some ways reinforces the fact that you're a motivated individual who did well, or you show that in some other way, right? Like maybe you did a startup which did well, or you can show some metrics, right? That's not a big company, but you can show that. Or if you were in a family business, right, you can get the recommendations, you can show what impact you made through the work you did. So I would not say that they only take people from big branded companies. Of course, it helps because it makes it easier for them to believe that you are going to be a successful candidate. Like once you join them.
If you've had a progressive career in that big company, though, that's
Yeah,
very important.
absolutely. So I would not say that it is a guarantee. It can be helpful, but at the same time, so many people from very different backgrounds and not big companies, who I see at business school. And so I would not let that be a reason to think that you have any less of a chance.
I agree with that. I think it just depends on really who you continue to be as an individual within that organization, and not so much the company, because in a big company, it's slightly more challenging to make an impact because everyone's fighting to make an impact, and you're among smart people. But the fact really is, if you progress there, then yes, the evidence is there, the letter of recommendations show that, and the evidence in some cases is also visible because those their products are more visible. But in a small company, you have much more of an opportunity to make an impact. Again, the LORs actually show that, and so it's in the end, it's about the impact that you make, big versus small. um, this is a very specific question: do folks from Colombia go into sustainable finance roles and work for World Bank, the United Nations, and you know you
Absolutely, 100%. In fact, sustainable finance is a very, it's a growing sector with more and more people who are interested. What is also very interesting about Colombia, one of the reasons I chose Colombia personally, which I don't know if everybody is aware of, but, Columbia Business School is a part of the bigger Columbia University. And Columbia University has, a law school, which is one of the best law schools in the world. It has a journalism school, again one of the top rated journalism schools in the world. It has a public policy school which is called CIPA, again very very well known in the industry. So what I would say is that when you're at Columbia, you have this very unique opportunity of cross registering at other schools. So I'm in fact planning to take a class in the fall at the law school, which is going to be taught by James Comey, who is the ex FBI director. And that for me is very exciting, and an opportunity that I don't think a lot of business schools around the world could offer me. So,
yeah.
coming to your question on sustainable finance roles, you have the opportunity of, say, for example, going to law school or the public policy school, and also, going deeper into these subjects. Because, for example, the public policy school, also focuses a lot on things like sustainable finance, ESG investing, etc. So you have that opportunity, but I have definitely seen people, take
Okay.
roles at World Bank, etc.
Okay, and I think a couple of that's very well said. By the way, first of all, thank you for that question because I didn't know that about Colombia with regards to sustainable finance. So I learned something which is very valuable for me, and I'm going to keep that. Also, we have a few more questions to go through, but for more such sessions, I'd recommend you guys subscribe to our channel. You're talking about law school in Columbia Law. I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she actually graduated from Columbia Law after she started her law journey at Harvard, right? If I remember correctly. And she was the Chief Justice at Supreme Court. So yeah, so that the opportunities of cutting across schools is, I
Absolutely.
think, incredible. That's there. Um, at a very high level, and can you really illustrate the difference between the applications, not SOPs? We don't have SOPs, but applications at both INSEAD versus Columbia.
Right. So the personally for me, I feel like, when it came to my personal journey, like my career, my goals, uh, I think my applications were very similar. Of course,
Mm,
there are different word limits. Some questions are phrased differently, so you have to tweak that around. But that part of it was very similar for me. I think where the difference was, of course, where they talk about why INSEAD versus why Columbia. So you need
mm,
to, you need to do some research. It's good to talk to some students
mm,
to understand specific things that you can then highlight how they would be helpful to you and how also you would contribute to the school. And that would be different for the schools, right? Like say for Columbia, one big reason which makes sense for a lot of people is that you get to be in New York City, right? Now, whether you
mm,
like that because you are somebody who loves art, history, culture, or is it because you want to go into finance and this is kind of the financial capital of the world. That's what makes Columbia unique. So they that would be one kind of difference. Personally, when I wrote the applications, Columbia also had another question, which, and every year I think Columbia has one question which is slightly unique and different from other schools. They wanted you to talk about a book or a movie or a song that had
yes, yes.
some kind of an influence in your life and how that impacted you and why that is your favorite book, movie, or whatever it is. That's an interesting question, and for me I think that also kind of goes to show a little bit of the personality of USB schools, where they want to get to know you not just as somebody who is smart, intelligent, and has had a successful career trajectory, but go a little bit deeper into understanding, are you an interesting person, do you have something more to talk about, right? Because that's very important at the end of the day. The conversations that you have in business school and outside, it's not just about your work and things, right? It's also just about who you are as a person and what you bring to the table, and are you somebody that you would enjoy speaking to, right? And that's what they're trying to gauge, I guess, through a question like that.
That's, I think, very interesting that you said. First of all, what did you say? Which book or person or song influenced you the most?
So
Who
I,
you?
in my application, I wrote about this movie called Erin Brockovich, which was Julia
Oh,
Roberts.
Erin Brockovich. Yes.
Yes. So I, it's interesting because I look back at my kind of, life over the years. And when I was in school, I pursued a lot of I didn't think it was sustainability then, but like environment friendly initiatives through like the Nature Club and things like that. And then, of course, I went into the energy infrastructure sector and then went into kind of sustainable initiatives. And, I look back and, that was a movie that, really resonated with me. So
And it
I
had
think
it also had law in it.
it also had law in it.
Yeah.
It had a very strong, independent woman, which for me
Mm,
was, a very, it was a good back. I saw it when I was very young, and that was it left,
mm,
a mark on my mind. So yeah, I kind of talked about that and did tie in all the pieces, kind of telling them, it had this strong,
mm,
independent woman. It talked about how you could use the law to, achieve outcomes that you want, and how sustainability was something that I started,
mm,
looking at more seriously after that. So yeah, just tied all of that together and just
mm.
explain to them why I like the movie.
Yeah, and I think for those of you who are Julia Roberts fans, one of her best performances, in my opinion. So, and also, and she was a secretary in that, and then she made this. This is the in the end. What was the entire settlement? 300, $350 million, or I think it was even more than that, if I recall. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
remember the number, but it's based on a true story. So,
Based
that
on a
was
true
also
story.
very inspiring to hear.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um, so then there was another question by Watsal. So I'm going to add some more. So Watson is upwards of 30 years old, and he's done his MBA. So it's like, so his question is second MBA, so people over 30.
Hmm.
Uh, have you seen students in your class who've done that? And yeah, so just
Absolutely. So I'll take this question in two parts. One is about being over 30. So I was over 30 when I applied for MBA, and it was something that I was kind of concerned about. Particularly, I mean, I was almost thinking of also choosing INSEAD because I was told that INSEAD has slightly older candidates, and I thought I'd probably fit that better because USB schools sometimes tend to have slightly younger candidates. Having said that, there are lots of students around me who are above 30 or are kind of turning 30 right now. So again, I would not let that be an influencing factor at all. In your decision making. Second is about the second MBA. I can only speak about this through friends that I know in business school, and I know people who've done one MBA before and then come for a second MBA. I don't have personal experience on this, but I can tell you that it does happen. There are successful candidates, and I guess it eventually just boils down to you making a very I think, robust and convincing story as to why the second MBA is useful for you in getting you where you want to go to. You can also use that as an advantage to say that, you have more experience over the years, you're going to be able to contribute better to classes, and, so many other things. So it's also an advantage in some ways, right? You just have to position
I
it.
think there's one other thing that you mentioned which is very valuable in this early on in this. It's just 2 months of compulsory courses. So that's kind of the only overlap with the first MBA because everything else is what you can choose.
It's the first 2 terms, which is about, I think, 4 months or so. But yeah, so and then you also have the option to exempt it, Rajat. So what's
Yeah.
really interesting is it allows you for all these core courses. Before you join business school, you can write exemption exams. So, for example, accounting, economics, statistics, and if you pass those exemption exams, then actually you don't even need to take those subjects, and you can instead take electives. So and I know people who've actually done that, and you just have access to such a again wide gamut of things to
And you
learn.
still get to take the other credits as part of the other courses, right? So if you've exempt from these, you can still use those remaining credits to take
Absolutely. You
other.
you have to compulsorily do 60 credits to get your MBA degree. And for those, either you do the compulsory ones and then you do the electives, or you exempt out of the compulsory ones or a few of those and then add electives. So that's completely on you.
Why did they not have it during my MBA? I would have exited economics and accounting, done that on my own. Okay, with that, a lot of you are worried about your GMAT preparation. We have a strategy session. Actually, it's one of the few sessions that I conduct, and it's a session that I look forward to. And just in that context, I want to ask you: I know you have this amazing profile. That amazing profile. So, what did that 740 score do to your confidence with that profile with regards to applying to these schools?
So I think, Rajat, for me, because like I said, I had about 8 years of work ex, and first I think I think I was really doubting whether I could go back to studying, and I think it just kind of reinforces the fact that you still have it in you to kind of push yourself hard and achieve the outcomes you want. And of course, once you are in the MBA program, you will be with very smart people and be thrown into lots of situations and things which are very new to you. Like I said, for me, I come from a law background, so for me a lot of what I was learning at business school was super new. But I think the GMAT score, like I said, tells you that you have it in you. You need to kind of just push yourself, put in the effort, and you'll see the results sooner or later. So it definitely is very good to just make you believe in yourself and your ability to pursue your goals.
So I've never asked this question, so I'm going to ask a follow-up question since you gave such a balanced response to that one. The skills that you learned while preparing for the GMAT, how have you used them during your MBA?
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if you have an answer for that one, but yeah.
I'd answer that in two parts. One is the technical skill, right? Now, being somebody like I'm fairly fluent in English, so I don't personally think that per se added.
You're a lawyer.
Yeah, it didn't add any specific value. In terms of the quant skills, yes, like I said, I think if I went into the MBA without having done the GMAT, I think it would take a little more work, and I'm so glad I did the GMAT to just make that a smoother transition, because you're not sitting and solving math problems, but you do end up like using a lot of strategies and like just basic concepts, which is good to brush over. Of course, if you're somebody who's already like done that recently, you may not think it may come easily to you. For me, that was important. The second thing I would say, which is non-technical, is I think when you're doing the GMAT in particular, I think for most people you'd be like balancing work and life with the GMAT. I think it's a good peek into what business school will ask of you, because when you're in business school, that's been my experience. I think you're between coursework and pursuing extracurricular activities, pursuing your career, networking, social life, which is a big part of business school. There is so much to juggle and balance all the time, and it's still something that I feel I'm working on and learning. And I feel like the GMAT just gave me a little peek into doing that, because it's a rigorous process. And like I said, if you're doing it with family, with work, with various other things, it kind of just prepares you to prioritize better, to use your
I
time.
was looking for that word.
For that word, yeah.
Yes, I was
uh,
looking for that word when you said that.
so
It's like, because that's what a lot of people tell me. It's like the biggest thing a B school has taught them is how to prioritize what needs to be done. Okay.
absolutely.
And with that, you talked about quant. We have a session on quant and number properties, I believe. And yeah, so something that that Pal would be hosting most likely. And so definitely join in for that. And then with that, I think we've come towards the end of this webinar. Ritik, I want to thank you for joining us today. Your inputs have been extremely valuable, and I wish you good luck. And one thing that I can say is, I think you're ready to be a consultant. You've, you've answered every question with that. I'll answer this in 2 points or so. Consultants just add a third point to it, but they already have that structure in there. And so yeah, thank you very much for this. And again, for more such sessions, subscribe to our channel, and B, register for Rohan's session next week. And guys, if you like it, please like the webinar as well, and you can post your comments here in the chat pod too. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jared. Really enjoyed this conversation with you. And once again, thank you so much for creating e-GMAT. It's been very, very instrumental in me reaching where I am today. And I do hope like other students get the opportunity to also benefit from the guidance and mentorship that e-GMAT is offering.
Well, thank you for being a student is all I can. And thank you for being diligent, because we can provide the best that we can. I think it's still your diligence, your sacrifices that make a difference. So yeah, thank you for being that.